Where does the current Ireland team, the 2023 vintage, rank in terms of the greatest teams of all time? Kind of making this video on the basis that Ireland are going to win a Grand Slam. This might look a bit foolish of a video if they don't get the Grand Slam, but should they get it, which is an incredible achievement whilst being number one in the world, all conquering and favourites for the Rugby World Cup later this year, where does this team rank? I'm joined again by Alfie Reynolds. Alfred Reynolds' YouTube channel is what you need to go and check out for that one. How are you doing, Alfie?
Yep, good. Thank you, Tim. I've realised as well, I've thrown people really off the scent, haven't I? Because I'm always known as Alfie, and then my YouTube channel goes by my full name of Alfred Reynolds. Yeah. But there we go. If you want to check it out, head over there.
I was just assuming that your mum set up your YouTube channel. That's all.
Well, she likes and watches every video, so you know.
Of course she does. That's what mums are for. So that was the question. Where does this Ireland team rank among the very greats? And they've earned the right to be considered and compared. And obviously them going on and how they get on in the World Cup is going to dictate how they're ultimately viewed. But at this point, I think it's a fair comparison to make because they're playing some incredible rugby, Alfie. But let's get the ball rolling on some of the great teams. Chuck one at me. What a great rugby team from the past you consider?
Well, I think the obvious place to start is in the Northern Hemisphere, first of all, and therefore it's the 2003 England team. And I did a little bit of research on this. I basically went back and looked at every single Grand Slam winning team in the Six Nations era, and basically looked at their points difference, the amount they scored and the amount they conceded, just to get a very basic kind of statistical look at where those teams were. And it is interesting, actually, that the 2003 England team, and I'll caveat this with, I know the game has changed immeasurably from 2 decades ago, but even so, that team are statistically way ahead of everyone else. They were plus 127 in terms of their points difference. They scored 173, which is the most out of any Grand Slam winning team. And they only conceded 46, which is the least of any Grand Slam winning team as well. So that 2003 England team, they went on to win the World Cup, but also I think from a statistical point of view of the Six Nations, they are head and shoulders above everyone else if we want to look back at the teams that have done a Grand Slam.
Yeah, that year building up to the World Cup, I just realised I just rattled through a bunch of pictures there, which might have distracted people as you were talking. But I realised I didn't have how did I not get a picture of the England 03 team ready? Just took it for granted. Yeah, they are total world beaters. But Ireland, well, it's all ifs at this point. But Ireland are following a similar trajectory in terms of the year they've had building up to a World Cup, if they go on and win the Grand Slam.
Yeah.
Should they then go on and do the business, then I think that they'll be punching right alongside them. I've got one for you then. In recent memory, the 2015 New Zealand side. I don't think there's ever been a team that's won a World Cup so convincingly and so comfortably. I mean, Australia battled their best in that final, but there was only ever one winner. And when you look at the names in that team, and this is what I think the comparison with Ireland is right now. When you look at the players that you consider world class, or should they win a World Cup, will be considered world class and greats for their country. They were all over that Ireland team. Kieran Reid and Richie McCaw in the back row, Ma Nonu and Dan Carter and Conrad Smith. And was it Woodcock and Mealamu? It's just like rugby legends everywhere.
Sonny Bill off the bench.
Sonny Bill off the bench. Ben Smith, ridiculous talent. It's incredible. So they have to be considered one of the. I think that's
a great show. I mean, they're the great side, aren't they, really? If you look at winning back-to-back World Cups, as you say, that 2015 World Cup, they cruised to it, really. You could make an argument, I think, that it wasn't the greatest of quality in terms of the rest of the teams, possibly, in that World Cup, but then also is that a reflection of... Yeah, but then it could just be a reflection of how good that New Zealand team were as well, potentially as well. So I think they are up there. I think the point where they are comparable to this current Ireland team is something we touched upon in the last video we did, which is just their ability to deal with whatever got thrown at them, which is kind of the impression of what we're getting from this Ireland side at the moment. That New Zealand side was set up and had the resources and had the players to problem solve and to deal with moments where they're put under pressure. You look back at the game at the weekend, even where Ireland against Scotland ended up winning relatively comfortably. But at the end of that first half, Scotland are getting them under pressure. It's a really, really tight game. And the second half, Ireland are just able to pull away and move away from them. And yeah, I think that's something that Ireland team probably has, which is comparable with that New Zealand team of 15.
Yeah, and I think the other big comparison with the New Zealand 15 team and the current Ireland crop is just, yeah, like I say, you've got players that are going to go down as greats in their country. Tyg Furlong and Andrew Porter in the front row. James Ryan at lock. Caelan Doris is looking like he's going that way. Josh van der Fleer at flanker. Peter O'Mahony. Just there's just incredible experience. There was a bunch of players in that New Zealand 15 team that were close to or over 100 caps. And the pedigree, and I only just talked about some of the forwards there, but you go right through that Ireland team, there is unbelievable quality and experience, and that's why I think that comparison's a great one. And yeah, I think I agree with you. They would have to be considered as one of the very great rugby teams ever. Have you got another team that springs to mind?
The other one that probably immediately springs to mind for me is the South Africa team of kind of 07, 08 World Cup champions. Won that unbelievable Lions tour as well. I'd probably throw them in there, in that you remember just, they had the physicality of that team. Again, kind of just what you've mentioned of legends of South Africa. If you want to talk about Bakkies Botha, Victor Matfield,
John Schmidt,
the Beast. I mean, all the guys in that, exactly, the back row they had, Brian Habana on the wings, De Villiers. I think all across that team, you have some guys that are thought of in incredibly high esteem in terms of South African rugby. The fact that they won the World Cup, the fact that they won that Lions series, I think they absolutely have the credentials to be mentioned in this conversation for sure.
And we've so far only mentioned people from the professional era, which is probably the right comparison to make. But I would just say, that was the New Zealand side of '95 that actually lost a World Cup final to South Africa. Yeah. All the rumours of the New Zealand team being poisoned, and the Jonah Lomu and Sean Fitzpatrick and that side, some absolute incredible players. Was that Cullen as well, and some unbelievable players in that New Zealand team that didn't actually win a World Cup. And well, we don't want Ireland to be. What team's that? I've lost New Zealand again. My pictures are a mess. I've messed them all up. Anyway, New Zealand. But what I wanted to say, I thought I was going to put in a picture up of New Zealand 1987. I've been a bit of a nerd lately. I remember when I was a kid, one time, my mum took us into work on a Saturday, and me and my brother, she just took us to Woolworths and said, "I'll pick a video to watch." And we picked the 1987 World Cup on. We had a VHS, and it was all the highlights of the 87 World Cup. And I put that in, and honestly, that New Zealand team, much like England 2003, were ahead of their time in conditioning. Michael Jones and Wayne Shelford and John Kerwin, just some unbelievable rugby players, and maybe, along with 2015, the most dominant rugby team at a World Cup. And I don't know what you think. What, as I sort of try and tie that together, you've talked already, I think in the last video, about the attacking structures of Ireland. Do you think they are ahead of the curve? Do you think they're leading the way and pioneering something new?
Yeah, for sure. I think particularly when you look at tactical trends in rugby, I always think kind of go in and out of fashion. And if you look at the last World Cup, it was a heavy kick game, massive physicality and defence, and kind of squeezing teams and suffocating them. It's what England did to New Zealand in the World Cup semi-final. It's what South Africa did to England in the World Cup final. And that was kind of how rugby was being played still, I think, in the first couple of years after the 2019 World Cup. And I feel like we've now moved into the territory where the sides that are having the most success are the sides that are able to attack, of course, you still need that defence and the kicking game and the physicality and all that sort of thing. But I do think everyone else is probably looking at Ireland at the moment and seeing that is the way forward, which actually makes it really difficult for teams, because you look at England, for example, and in the last video we talked about them going to Dublin this weekend. They're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if they try and play a more expansive attacking game, they'll get beaten because they're not able to do it. But I don't think they'll be good enough to squeeze Ireland either. I feel like Ireland have kind of got that balance. You look at the best teams in the world at the moment, and yeah, I think they're able to attack more expansively, and Ireland are the team that do that better than anyone else. You just get the impression, don't you, when you watch them? It doesn't matter where the ball is. It doesn't matter what the ruck speed is. doesn't matter where you're all positioned on the field. Everyone knows what they have to do at that moment in time. That's the kind of thing that strikes me really when I watch Ireland with ball in hand.
It's like a hive mind, isn't it? It's so it's so automatic. It's really special to behold. Just any other nations to shout? I just want to shout the Australia '99 team was a really, really good one. John Eales was the skipper.
Yeah,
that was a class rugby team. Tim Horan and Matt Burke and George Gregan. There's some really properly good rugby players in that '99 team. So they're another great. But unless you got any more to chip
99
in,
was the.
Oh yeah, go on.
No, 99 was the one really that I thought we probably needed to mention. And people watching this as well probably will say, well, Ireland haven't even won a World Cup yet, and you're comparing them to sides that have reached the top of the mountain. We get that, don't we? I think it's more just the way in which they're playing at the moment. It's interesting to compare them to them really. But no, I've got no other teams to throw in the mix there, Tim. I think we've probably covered off the main ones. I'm sure there'll be somewhere in the comments, won't there, people mentioning something, and we'll be like, of course we should have mentioned that team, but nothing springs to mind.
Yeah, like you say, the 2019 South Africa, what they did better than anyone, and there's all sorts of arguments for all sorts of sides. But I think the one thing that all the teams we mentioned have in common is that they moved rugby on, and they either had a load of incredible quality players all arriving at their peak at the same time. Well, no, they both had incredible players arriving at their peak at the same time, and revolutionized the game in some way and set the blueprint that everyone else then followed. And we could be talking about that in terms of France 2023 come November, but we could absolutely be very, very much talking about this Ireland team. Who do you still stick with England 03 as the greatest rugby team of all time in the professional era?
No, I'd have to go to 2015 New Zealand. I think really. I think from obviously in terms of the Northern Hemisphere, I think that England 2003 team are a cut above anyone else we've seen in terms of what they did, in terms of I think they just steamrolled their way through Six Nations and to that World Cup. But no, I think the 2015 New Zealand is so difficult, isn't it? Because I do look at, I watched back games from the 2003 World Cup, and you look at it now and you think, if you picked up that team and dropped them into the Six Nations this weekend, they'd lose to whichever side they came up against. I think the game has moved on that much, so it's so difficult to compare. But what do you reckon? Who are you going for?
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. So let me ask the next question then, just to round it off. If Ireland firstly go on and win the Grand Slam, and then if Ireland manage to banish the curse of the quarterfinal, and if they manage to do the unthinkable and win the World Cup, would this Ireland team leap ahead of England and potentially ahead of New Zealand and be regarded as the greatest team of all time?
I don't think they'd leap ahead of New Zealand just because of the back-to-back World Cups. That was the bulk of the same New Zealand squad. Their win percentage was over best part of a decade, was in like the 90% or something. It was ridiculous.
Change
I think
head coach as well between those two.
Yeah, exactly. I think they would be up there with England in terms of the best team to come out of the Northern Hemisphere, and whether they were ranked above them, I think would probably depend on, one, their route to the World Cup final, and given the side of the draw they're on, I think there's the potential that they could have a much harder route. And then second of all, I think it's also whether they kick on and continue to dominate and be as good. That England team, that was their pinnacle, wasn't it? It was a quick decline. Players retired after 03. This Ireland side, that's not necessarily going to be the case. There'll be some turnover in that squad. You would have thought, what's the future look like for Ireland without Johnny Sexton? The question that we seem to have been asking for the last 5 years. So I think it depends. If I can sit on the fence a little bit, they'll be up there with England 03. They wouldn't be better than New Zealand 2015.
I'm just imagining Johnny Sexton being held aloft on the rest of his teammates' shoulders, holding that gold trophy and shouting 4 more years to the camera. Keep him going, keep him going. I mean, he plays like 4 games a season for Leinster. Why not? Keep him patched up. But no.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Well, tell us in the comments, firstly, is there any teams we missed? And secondly, again, we know this Ireland team are ultimately going to be judged on this October and November. But as things currently stand, do you think any of the comparisons we've made are fair, and where are they potentially to be ranked in amongst those teams? It's an interesting question, and it speaks volumes to how good Ireland are that we're even having the chat, Alfie.
Yeah, exactly. They are brilliant at the moment. I think they're probably, since England 2003, I think they're the best. For me, they're the best Grand Slam winning, if they win the Grand Slam, which I think they will do this weekend. They're the best Grand Slam winning Six Nations team, I think, since that England side in 2003.
Yeah, 100%. And the entertainment value they've given that. Well, I mean that first half against France was incredible, but the second half, I was almost more impressed by, because they completely shut France down, and they're a very, very special team. And again, to see someone that we could have had leading that group of men stings a little bit, but at least we can say England have had a little tiny part in the puzzle.
Yeah, we've got to let it go, Tim. We've got to let it go.
Got to let it go. Right, thank you very much for watching. That nice one, Alfie.
Pleasure, Tim. Speak soon.
Go hit subscribe, Alfred Reynolds on YouTube. Hit subscribe here as well. Leave your comments, and we'll see you on the next video.